I'm Chris from the Hypro Service Department. Today I'll be showing you how to work on a 2400 series Powerline Plus plunger pump. The tools required for working on this pump include an external plier, a needle nose pliers, a flat blade screwdriver, a torque wrench, a rubber hammer, a 9/16 socket, a 1-inch socket, a 1/4-inch Allen wrench, a 1-inch pipe or piece of PVC, and a 1-inch roller from a larger roller pump or something of equivalent size for removing the oil seals. Let's get started. Use your 1/4-inch Allen wrench to remove the 6 head bolts. Rotating the crankshaft can help to separate the head from the crankcase. If needed, use your flat blade screwdriver to pry it off the rest of the way, being careful not to damage the seal retainers underneath. Remove the backup rings and the high pressure seal. If needed, you can use your external pliers to remove these and inspect them for any cracking, damage, scratches on the inside, or melting from running the pump dry. Repeat for each cylinder. Sometimes the backup rings or one of the other components may come out with the head and stick in here, or they might stick on to the plunger itself. Next thing would be to remove these seal retainers to look at the low pressure seals and the seal rings. Remove that washer, and then this is your low pressure seal. You'll want to inspect that for any deep scratches, melting from running the pump dry, or other damage. Use your flat blade screwdriver to remove that, paying attention to its orientation. It goes in with that groove facing this way up towards the top of the head. Then we can pull off these retainers and inspect the O-ring and seal ring for any damage or deep scratches. These seals are all included in the repair kit. Repeat for the other 2 plungers. Now that we've inspected the packings for wear and damage, the next thing to do is to take a look at the valves. Use your 1-inch socket to remove the valve caps. Inspect the valve caps for extreme wear on the inside here. You'll see a pattern that looks like the top of the valve cage. The next thing would be to remove the valves themselves. Use your needle nose pliers to remove the valves. And you'll want to check for any obstructions in the valve or a broken spring. Use your flat blade screwdriver to separate the seat from the cage and inspect the spring, the poppet for any pitting or abrasion, and also the valve seat for pitting. Replace if necessary. Checking the valves for wear and obstructions is one of the first things you'd want to do if you've experienced a loss of pressure. It can also be caused by wear in the head, or a clogged strainer, or too small of an inlet line. Remove the valve O-rings with a screwdriver and inspect the surface area that the valve sits on. It should be smooth all the way across. If you feel a step in it, the head is beginning to wash out and should be replaced. Here's an example of a washed out head. Notice the step on this surface area. That head should be replaced. Now that we've inspected the wet end components, we can check the plunger area, and also if the pump has been leaking oil from this weep hole area, we'll want to change out the oil seals. First thing that you need to do is remove these plungers by taking your 9/16 socket and removing the nuts. Remove the plungers by twisting and pulling them straight off. And you'll want to inspect these for any deep scratches or chips. Replace if necessary. To remove the oil seal, you'll need to remove this brass cartridge by taking your flat blade screwdriver and prying it out. Sling a ring. This is your oil seal. Inspect that for any damage, deep scratches, and also you can inspect the lower plunger for any deep scratches as well that may cause a leak. Next thing will be to remove the oil seal from this cartridge. To remove the oil seal from the cartridge, you'll want to use a roller,
part number 1005-0005,
or a bolt or a piece of PVC pipe, whatever you can find that will fit down onto the casing of the seal, and press it out. And also inspect this O-ring for any damage and replace if necessary. To reinstall the new seal, you'll want to make sure that the spring side is facing away from the cartridge, and then press that straight on. That's it. Repeat for the other two. Now that we've installed our new oil seals, we can put the cartridges back in. You'll want to lubricate this outer O-ring and the seal itself, and then twist and push it on until it bottoms out. Repeat for the other two. You want to be careful not to roll the lip of that seal over and pop the spring off of it. That's why you lubricated it and twist it as you put it on. Put the slinger rings back on. Inspect these O-rings and backup rings for any damage and replace if necessary. Put a little oil on those before we reinstall the plungers. Want to twist and push them straight on. And then use a medium strength Loctite and reinstall the plunger nuts and torque them between 115 and 120 inch-pounds. Wipe off any excess Loctite that's left over, and we can begin reassembling the head. Next, we'll put the valves back into the head. We'll want to reassemble these with the spring in the cage first, and then we want to face this poppet in this way, and then snap the seat back into the cage. We'll put our valve O-rings back in. And drop the valves in. Push them down straight. You want to make sure that it's not angled in there, for when we run the valve cap down, you don't want to crush that cage, so we'll make sure that that's straight up and down. And then on these valve caps, inspect the O-ring for any damage and replace if necessary. And then torque these valve caps to 85 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're ready to reinstall our new packings and packing retainers. First thing we'll do is install the high pressure cups into the head, and what you'll want to do is put some oil on these cups and make sure that this groove is facing the head. Push it down into the head. Repeat for the other two. Groove facing the head. Okay. Now the rest of these packings and retainers we'll actually put onto the plungers before we put the head on. So take these retainers and put the outer O-ring on them. Slide those on. Put oil on that O-ring. And then the next step will be to put these seal rings and these O-rings into these retainers. So put some oil on the sealer ring. Push that over the plunger. Put oil on this O-ring. And then take this washer and put it on. And we'll want to push that O-ring over the seal ring until that washer bottoms out. You may need to use a piece of pipe or PVC. And repeat for the other two. That seal ring, put some oil on it. Push that onto the plunger. Put some oil on this O-ring. You want to be careful not to distort these rings. If you crease it, throw it away and put a new one in there. Okay. The next thing we want to do is install the low pressure seals into these cartridges. Helps to put a little oil on the outside. And then this groove on the cup faces up towards the tapered end of the retainer. And then push that straight onto the plunger. Next, put your backup rings back on. And now we can reinstall the head and torque the bolts. Reinstall the Allen bolts. Torque to 170 inch-pounds. Now that the pump is completely reassembled, turn the crankshaft by hand and make sure it turns nice and free. Refill the crankcase with 26 ounces of 30 weight non-detergent oil, and be sure to reinstall that vented dipstick. This has been the 2400 series Powerline Plus plunger pump. For additional information, visit us online at www.hypropumps.com or give us a call at 1-800-468-3428. To change the shaft orientation from standard to left-handed, you'll need to remove the head and then put the pump into a vise to remove the cover and side covers. After securing the pump into a vise, use your 1/4 inch Allen wrench to remove the end cover bolts. It may be necessary to use a rubber hammer to remove the end cover by gently tapping on it. Remove any excess gasket material on either of these surfaces with a fine wire brush. After removing the end cover and any excess gasket material, use your 1/4 inch wrench to remove the side covers. It may be necessary to use a rubber hammer and tap on the corner of the side cover so you have more to grab onto and pull it straight off. Remove the other side cover the same way. And now remove the crankshaft by twisting and pulling it out. And since you have the head off, you can move the plungers up and down as necessary to line it up with the lobes of the crankshaft for removal. And then we'll reinstall it facing this way. Before reinstalling the crankshaft, apply some oil to the lobes of the crankshaft and also to the inside of the connecting rods. And make sure these surfaces are clean of any dirt. When reinstalling, begin with the center lobe facing down, and from underneath, adjust the height of the plungers as necessary to match up and slip the lobes of the crankshaft through it without forcing it. You may want to use a flat blade screwdriver to help align a connecting rod if need be, being careful not to damage it. You shouldn't need to force these in here if everything is lined up. Okay. Now that we've reinstalled the crankshaft, we can put the side covers back on. They are interchangeable from side to side. Notice that there's an angle to this that needs to face, the taper needs to face down towards the head. Apply a small amount of oil to the inside of the seal before reinstalling this side cover. Make sure the pump turns freely. It's a good idea to use a thread sealant type of Loctite on the side cover bolts to prevent an oil leak. It's a good idea to start these bolts by hand and then use your 1/4-inch Allen wrench and torque them between 100 and 110 inch-pounds. After torquing down the side cover bolts, turn the crankshaft again and make sure that it turns freely. Reinstall a new gasket and reinstall the end cover with the drain facing down and the vent plug facing up. Reinstall the end cover bolts and torque them between 100 and 110 inch-pounds. After torquing down the end cover, remove the pump from the vise and reinstall the head.